Today is Mother's Day, as I was saying to Charlotte, a time for brunches, flowers, Zoom calls, and get-togethers. For many people, this may be the first time in 2 years that they've actually been in the same room with their mother on Mother's Day. The pandemic has kept grown children apart from their mothers. And past Mother's Day, I know that some people just came up to a window and waved through a window or met in driveways. The pandemic has also imposed a steep toll on mothers with children in the house. When school shifted to home, studies have found that it was mostly women who bore the brunt of that burden, taking care of kids who were suddenly home during the day when they wanted to be at work. And as much as our society talks of making parenting something which is equally shared among fathers and mothers, the reality is that women withdrew from the workforce in record numbers, usually to care for children who were suddenly at home all the time. Mothers have had a really hard 2 years, and it may take years to recover. That close link between mothers and children is not just chance, of course. Mothers are the only people that get pregnant and have children, and usually provide most of the care for the infants. Infants come to associate feelings of tenderness and love and security with their mothers in a unique way. And scientists have found that breastfeeding in particular induces a kind of chemical reaction, a chemical love affair between infants and their mothers through the stimulation of certain neurochemicals in the infant's brain as well as the mother's brain. Those same chemicals, neurochemicals, are activated when adults fall in love with each other. For children, the conviction that mothers are a source of physical and emotional safety starts in infancy and continues for a lifetime. In today's psalm, we hear an echo of that feeling of safety. The 23rd Psalm opens with those famous words, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The psalmist imagines being led like a sheep by a shepherd to still waters and green pastures. This is clearly a metaphor because no one really knows what sheep think. Sheep may deeply resent being bossed around by shepherds all day long. We don't know, and we have no way of asking them. So instead, it seems most likely that the psalmist is projecting a known human emotion onto those sheep, an emotion which human beings feel in the safety of being in their mother's arms. That sense of security, of being fed and cared for that we experience as small children. And of course, men can provide this too. But for the most part, in most families, and certainly before the last 2 centuries, it was usually women who did this work. The psalm would have worked just as well if it had started with the words, "The Lord is my mother, I shall not want." Now, most of mothering, of course, doesn't involve non-stop moments of bliss. That is simply not the case. Infancy is about crying and unsatisfied babies as much as it is about babies who are feeling all blissed out after being fed. Kids need a lot of help and love to become adults. They have a really hard time seeing the sense in much of what adulthood requires. This leads to tears, to anger and misunderstandings and resentments, often directed at mothers. And in this sense, mothering and fathering is like shepherding reluctant sheep a lot of the time, and this stage lasts for many, many years. What starts out as a basic need to keep an infant alive splinters into 1,000 complex pieces as children grow up, which even therapists struggle to understand. There is nothing simple about anyone's relationship with their mother. And this week, mothering became even more complicated after a leak from the U.S. Supreme Court delivered the news that the court was considering removing abortion rights from the federal level of government and devolving it back onto the states. The court seems to be ready to strike down 2 previous rulings and to give control of abortion laws back to individual states. And this will result in at least 26 states rolling back abortion services and in many cases banning them entirely. One state's even considering making it a criminal offense to terminate any pregnancy starting at the moment of conception. That's what's on the books currently in Louisiana as they consider it in the House. The central issue will become who gets to decide whether a woman becomes a mother, the woman who's pregnant or the government. Some states, like Texas, have already passed legislation which allows citizens to report on women who seek abortions and even charge anyone who helps them get an out-of-state abortion. Other states are looking to adopt similar legislation. If motherhood starts out inspiring a state of bliss, it now seems poised to become a time of suspicion, dread, and potential jail time for women who decide they do not want to be mothers at this moment. Now, it may seem highly inappropriate to bring up such difficult issues on Mother's Day, which is supposed to be a feel-good day. The hardest decisions we should be facing today are where should we park to get to brunch on time, instead of talking about abortion issues. But you know, what we expect from Mother's Day now is very different from what the people who invented Mother's Day had in mind. Mother's Day is an American invention, and we can credit this woman for having brought it to our culture. Her name is Ann Jarvis. She lived in West Virginia, and in 1858, she started what she called Mothers' Work Days. Mothers were invited to join her in cleaning up the town's sanitation system because she was concerned about the high rate of infant mortality in her town. And these became annual events and widened. They ended up helping mothers who had tuberculosis. And during the Civil War, her particular town in her state ended up being a place where both sides had encampments, the Confederates as well as the Union armies. And on the Mothers' Work Days, they sent mothers from their town to both camps to tend to the wounded. And this didn't just happen on the Mothers' Work Days, it also happened generally. After the war, Jarvis organized Mother's Days to help soldiers from both sides get together in the same room with their mothers to try and find a way to reconcile people who had been shooting each other just a few years before. Her idea caught on elsewhere in the country. Mother's Day, back then, was a regular time for peace marches to be held, and anti-war marches, both in the United States and other countries. It was Jarvis's daughter, Anna, her grown daughter, who lobbied to have it declared a national day the way it is now. Multiple states and provinces were already observing it by 1914 when the American government decided to make Mother's Day the formal celebration that it is now, and Canada followed suit the year afterwards. But there was a shift in what Mother's Day meant. What started out as a day for all mothers became a day about individual mothers. Florists got involved. Greeting card companies got involved. Hallmark was all over it. And Anna Jarvis watched in horror as Mother's Day, plural, became Mother's Day with an apostrophe, where something which had started off as the interests of all mothers became just about your mom. This infuriated her so much that she and her sister lobbied for years to try and have Mother's Day repealed. They felt that the modern version of Mother's Day was an affront to what her mother had in mind, and so they even launched lawsuits against various bodies to try and pull it back. they were unsuccessful. Today, it may seem naive in the greatest degree to believe that Mother's Day could ever stand for the interests of all mothers. Mothers do not come in one size or one political bent. Mothers have all sorts of different ideas about the world. However, Anne Jarvis invented Mother's Day because she felt that the interests of mothers were not being heard or listened to by the men who were in charge of the government. So she decided to act on her own and got other mothers to act with her. And in our time, laws are being written about abortion that speak of fetal rights and viability and heartbeats, but the perspectives of mothers themselves are seldom mentioned in these forms of legislation. So what would the abortion issue look like if we took Jarvis's approach? What if we asked mothers why they want abortions? Well, fortunately, many studies have asked exactly that question, and the answers are surprising. In the United States, almost half of all women who get abortions are poor. 47% of them live at or below the poverty line. About 60% of women who get abortions in the United States are mothers. They've already got children. Although single women, of course, do seek out abortions for various reasons, they are in the minority. Most women who want abortions are poor, and having another child will place a serious burden on their family's ability to get by. Women seek out abortions for all sorts of reasons. Teens get pregnant before they can support a family. Some women are raped. Others live in households with abusive partners. While others simply can't afford the cost of another child right now. Women also get abortions for medical reasons, ectopic pregnancies, pregnancies which are literally dangerous to their life. Abortions are usually sought as a solution to a highly pressing problem that will affect a woman's well-being in the years to come. When states deny women abortions, mothers suffer. Abortion is not free in the United States as it is here. Federal funds don't cover it. Every single year, Congress passes an amendment to make sure that federal funds never go towards abortion, so you can't use Medicaid to get an abortion. Private insurance companies often don't cover it either. So poor women already living near or below the poverty line have to find $600 to $1,000 to get an abortion. They also need to get transportation, often out of state, particularly in the South. And they need to find someone to watch their kids, since most of them are mothers. And they need to forego the money that they may be making at that job that they have. Mothers who cannot get the money together are forced to stay in the crisis that inspired the need for the abortion. They have to stay with an abusive partner. Teens have to reveal to their parents that they're pregnant, risking family rupture, especially if the pregnancy was caused by incest or rape. The problems which inspire the desire for an abortion do not go away when abortion is out of reach. Whatever happens with abortion law in the United States, it appears clear that there will be a two-tiered system. Wealthy women will be able to travel and pay for abortions, whereas poorer women who need abortions most often will not. Abortion bans are part of a war against poor mothers, about 50% of whom are women of color. When we really look at who has the most abortions anti-abortion law seems like a form of economic oppression posing as morality. All of this is hidden as long as we focus on the rights of the fetus. Proponents of abortion bans like to present the issue as a straightforward moral issue. Christianity says that killing is wrong, so states should ban abortion. How any individual interprets Scripture and applies it is, of course, up to that person. That is the nature of your spiritual journey. However, states are not moral actors. God does not deal with states. God deals with human beings. And context is all important for God. It matters a lot what else is going on in your life when you make a decision. God gets that. States who wish to ban abortion do not get that. They apply rules across the board, ignoring the situations of individual mothers. What's more, states do not act consistently. Here's a paradox about the abortion debate in the United States. This map of the United States shows in red all the states that currently practice capital punishment. They kill adult prisoners who have committed crimes. Now here's a map of all the states that want to ban abortion or have already done so. The majority of states that oppose abortion approve of capital punishment. If states were consistent, they would oppose both capital punishment and abortion, but they don't. States are composed of elected officials who want to get reelected and receive money from powerful lobbies. Most states where abortion is restricted or banned have populations who are actually in favor of abortion to some degree or another. The states that are banning abortion are not reacting to the popular vote in their states. That's not the case. The majority of Americans think that abortion is fine. State laws often do not reflect the opinions of the electorate, nor are they morally consistent. However, states do have the power to disregard the views and interests of mothers who want to make their own decisions about having a child. States treat all mothers the same in the names of the needs of the fetus rather than the needs of real-life mothers. On Mother's Day, let's remember that if we really respect mothers, they should be the ones telling us what they want for themselves and for the world. That is what inspired the first Mother's Days. The idea that mothers should have a chance to speak for themselves and that they have something important to say, which may be at odds with what the state of their time is saying. Mothers may be ahead of the curve, and so we should at least listen to them. As church people, it's tempting for us to think in terms of moral absolutes. But if we're ever tempted to do that, think about today's psalm. In the second part of the psalm, the focus shifts, and the psalmist writes in the first person, no longer pretending to be a sheep. We hear about God protecting us as we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, when life seems most uncertain and perilous. We're told that God sets a table for us in the wilderness where our cup will overflow, that abundance that God offers. And note, this table is set in the presence of our enemies. God protects us, the psalm says, and lets us eat even in the presence of disagreement and danger. Please note that the psalm doesn't say that God will go out and destroy those enemies for us. Instead, we are offered to have a picnic in their view. Real life is not about moral absolutes where we're right and others are hunted down and eliminated because they are wrong. We may yearn for that peace that we experienced when we were infants in our mother's arms, but in reality, we live in a world where people disagree. Our faith offers us the strength to feel God's loving presence and support even when it feels like the world is against us. To know that our Mother God is still with us. When Anne Jarvis invented Mother's Day, she took an extra step and invited some of those enemies over to share in the dinner. She got Civil War soldiers and their mothers from both sides together every year on Mother's Day in the hope that they would be able to find some kind of common language, some sort of underlying compassion. Mother's Day began with the understanding that mothers do not all agree, but despite that, they should be heard. And in respecting their real life needs and wants, a better society can be built through understanding and compassion. So, happy Mother's Day. Amen.